I thought that Rotary was for older businessmen. I didn't even realise that girls were invited, when actually it's really exciting to find out that Rotary is for everybody, that it is for, you know, the social entrepreneur on the high street, for the people that are just starting up, you know, like I am.
Well, Rotary's goals have always been the same, working in the community, and these social enterprises are all about working in the community, so we should be working together in the community. It's very simple.
Rotary has changed my life by networking me in with other knowledgeable business professionals and taking on board my crazy and welcoming it as an entrepreneur.
This club is great for us because we now have a small person to consider who's welcome at meetings, and the club is soon to be flexible that we can come along to whatever we need to. It just offers so many opportunities for helping in all kinds of different ways and ways which I really want Matthew to benefit from.
We think it's important that children come along, and particularly as a parent, for them to learn that they should be giving back to their community to help make a difference.
I wanted to become a Rotarian because I wanted to promote that young people in Rotary can do more. Young people can be heavily involved, they can be enthusiastic, and they can be trusted in succeeding and pushing the Rotary further. And I want to help as many young people as well as adults in the community and help develop the community for it to be a better place.
Is it good fun?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And what do you learn?
Helping other people and making them join the club.
Good work. Future membership and marketing chairman right here.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am not going to ring a bell since I don't have one. So welcome, Rotarians, guests, anyone else that's on, and welcome to Matt's third laptop. Also, Rick Russell, welcome. Rick was a new member in July of this year, and he will be introduced as a new member later on. So welcome, Rick. And he's also our speaker, and he's from Hospice of Northwest Ohio. Next, I would like to invite Heather Carnes to deliver a reflection, followed by Steve Miller leading the pledge. So Heather.
Thank you, President Bob. Fellow Rotarians, before providing today's reflection, I want to ask everyone to keep fellow Rotarian Kevin Mullen in your thoughts and prayers. He was in the hospital and is now back home, hopefully not attending this call and taking it easy. He's working through some medical issues right now and could use our support. So please keep him in your thoughts. As I was looking for inspiration for today's reflection and looked out upon all of the snow we've received, I came across this quote by Rosalie Muller-Wright. January is the quietest month in the garden, but just because it looks quiet doesn't mean that nothing is happening. As we continue on into 2022, especially during these cold and seemingly quieter months, let us make sure that something is happening for ourselves. We can recognize the good in our day-to-day and be a light to those who need it, as we never know what others are struggling with. And let us make sure something is happening for our Rotary Club. Extend a hand or an elbow to say hello to someone new, welcome each other by appreciating our differences, not just our similarities, and continuing to engage in important and meaningful service within our community. Thank you.
Steve, if you'll lead the pledge.
If we could all stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Steve. And as you probably all know, they are current board members and they are doing a fantastic job. So I'm glad also that you got to see them doing the reflection and the pledge today. I would also like to thank fellow Rotarian Brian Kennedy and Raymond as our sponsor for January. I don't really have too many other remarks other than thank you, Heather, for recognizing Kevin Mullen's medical issues. And I do hope that everyone can keep him in your thoughts and your prayers. And he's recovering so far, so he needs to have the rest of us backing him up. Next, I would like to just move on and introduce Jack Hollister. And he is going to introduce our speaker, Rick Russell. And Jack, you're also going to introduce Rick as a new member. So it's all yours.
Thank you, President Bob, and good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Rick Russell, who is the President and CEO of Hospice of Northwest Ohio. Not only is Rick our speaker today, but he is also a new member to the Downtown Rotary, having joined in the second half of 2021. I've been encouraged not to give all the bio info on Rick, and so you can find much of that in the spoke or on our website, but I would like to try to just give you a few highlights. Rick is the third CEO of Hospice of Northwest Ohio, having been selected by the board to replace Judy Siebenek, a former Rotarian of our club, in March of 2021. Rick is a graduate of BGSU with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing and also a graduate of the University of Toledo with a Master's in Business Administration. John Maxwell, a leadership thinker, speaker, and author, describes leadership simply as influence. And I like a quote of Rick's that essentially says, "When I realized the significant impact that I could make on others as a leader, I was hooked." Using his influence for the betterment of others sounds like the great qualification for leadership and right in line with the values of Rotary. I'll let you read more about Rick on his own, but I thought I might share a couple of personal items just for fun. Rick's favorite restaurant in the Toledo area is Rosie's Italian Grill. His favorite hobby is golf. His best vacation location is anywhere he is with his whole family. The best kept secret of Northwest Ohio is a small town feel with big town amenities. The next thing he wants to knock off his bucket list is a Montana fly fishing trip. His secret or not so secret vice is Reese's peanut butter cups, or I'm sorry, Reese's peanut butter eggs. And I asked, do you tell dad jokes and how bad are they according to your kids? And he says, I tell them a lot and they have a groan factor of 7 or 8. And he is a recent grandfather for the first time and says that's the best gig ever. Ladies and gentlemen, Rick Russell.
I appreciate it, and thanks for having me and allowing me to present all the good stuff that's going on at Hospice in Northwest Ohio. See if I can work the technology. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
All right, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about where Hospice of Northwest Ohio, a little bit about us and kind of the future and what we're looking for both in the hospice locally, but in the industry. And for us, slide presentation will advance. Everything for us is about our mission and vision, and our mission is clearly to serve anyone who's dealing with a life-limiting condition. So we have two different programs that cover that. One is for those who are still fighting the good fight. And then the second program we have, which is the one that's been around for the longest, over 40 years, is our hospice program. And it really is about those dealing with end-stage illness and who choose comfort care. So, as I said, 40 years ago, a small group of thoughtful, committed volunteers, led by Roland Scale, and they came together and really built a foundation of what would become Hospice of Northwest Ohio. They believed that there was a better way to provide compassionate care for those facing a terminal illness, and they were right. We were the first Medicare certified certified hospice program in the state of Ohio, and one of the first 50 in the country. So we have obviously a very long legacy, not just in the community, but as far as the hospice benefit nationwide. Our first year, we had 5 staff, and we took care of 90 patients. And now we serve more than 2,600 patients a year and have almost 400 staff and nearly 170 volunteers. We are the area's only independent nonprofit agency that is dedicated to serving the terminally ill. Our service area is very tight. We are focused on those patients in Lucas, Henry, Fulton Wood, and Ottawa counties, and then in Monroe County in Michigan, we also have an office that has been there and actually was licensed much before our Ohio office. So we have a long legacy in Southeast Michigan. What is surprising to a lot of folks is, where do we provide care? We do have 2 inpatient units, one in South Toledo and one on River Road in Perrysburg, and that's what usually people associate with a hospice program. But I can tell you that an overwhelming majority of our patients are cared for in the community, whether that's our own home, in nursing homes or assisted livings, and some care actually in local hospitals. But our foundation of care was at first in the community and serving the community. And when we decided to build inpatient centers to provide a higher level of care, the community came together with tremendous support, and both of our buildings were completely paid for before they opened. So that is really just a testament to the strong support that we've had in the community over the years. One thing that we like to highlight is the excellence of our clinical staff. Obviously, everything for us is about patients and families, and I ask the staff just to consider one question whenever they're working in the field or supporting those that do: is the decision you're about to make in the best interest of a patient or family? And if the answer is yes, then it's always the right answer. So that bar for excellence, that clinical excellence, and that focus on patient care is really evident in the entire team. And one measure that we look at is how many of our staff have actually set the bar by becoming certified in their specialty. And I'm proud to say that over 75% of our eligible staff are certified. And that is the leader in the region, and it's one of the highest numbers nationwide, which really, as I say, is a testament to the commitment and dedication of our team. As Jack said, I was fortunate enough to be chosen as the 3rd leader for Hospice in Northwest Ohio. Virginia Clifford on the right. On my left there, you can see is our founding executive director. She was at the home for about 20 years before she retired. And then Judy, after being with the program for 20 years, stepped in, and then she served 20 years as the CEO. So I'm fortunate to be part of that company and to continue the legacy that they set out for us. Just a little bit about what we do. And under the hospice program, which has been our longest standing program, we'll talk about palliative care in a moment. All the services we provide are covered by most insurances, and overwhelmingly Medicare covers what we do. But it includes all of the medical nursing care to provide any symptom management that is needed, aid services, anything related to the care. Whatever visits we provide are covered. There is no unbundling. That was the term that used in healthcare 15, 20 years ago. All of this is provided, whatever the needs are, provided for every dollar that we receive. Emotional and spiritual support for the patient and family is key. Clearly, the patient is the focal point for our care, but we wrap our arms around the patient and family as we're delivering care and provide that emotional and spiritual support. And once that patient passes on, we continue that support for that patient and family for as long as they need it, but most are at least 1 year. You can see on the slide, there are other therapies that provide everything that we do is provided with a goal of comfort and support. And that really goes back to our founders and what they thought was the right thing to do. And as the benefit has evolved over the years, it has included all of those items. We also have a strong connection to the community as far as education. It has been a key component of our mission. It is part of our mission statement, and it will continue. Since 1999, we've partnered with UT College of Medicine and Life Sciences to provide end-of-life education, and that commitment continues today. We have teaching rounds with the residents and medical students, both at UTMC and over at Toledo Hospital, to make sure that they're on the leading edge of end-of-life care. And it is critical that we continue to do that because there is a very small percentage, and a few years ago, the number was 2% of the medical schools nationwide that spent any significant time talking about end-of-life care. So we feel it's critical for us to step in and make sure that the physicians that are being trained in this area understand and have a very sound foundation in how to deal with those dealing with end of life. Our palliative care services program is one of the best kept secrets in the area, I believe, and we were the first in the area to start a palliative care services program. So the difference between palliative care and hospice is that when we're talking about hospice care, we're talking about really strictly comfort care. Sincera is providing comfort, but those patients and families are often still receiving aggressive treatment. So their goal can still be for cure. And a lot of the patients that we deal with do actually come off our program because their cancer is in remission or their condition improves and they're no longer in need of our services, which is a tremendous outcome for us. So we're looking at improving quality of life for the patient and family, but it is focused on providing relief from any pain or symptoms that they have as a result of that illness. And we were the first community-based palliative care program in Ohio to receive Joint Commission's Gold Seal of Approval. And that still is a gold standard, and there are very few throughout the state that have that standard, so we're very proud of that. You can see on this slide, it talks about the differences between palliative care. On the left side of the screen, it talks about palliative care, and it's based on patient need, not prognosis. So on the right side, you'll see that hospice care is focused on a life expectancy of 6 months or less, and that's required by Medicare. And that's a bit of a misnomer, which I could talk about for an hour, but it really is focused on those that are expecting end of life if the disease would follow its normal course. Again, on the left, you'll see treatments don't have an impact on palliative care because we're usually walking right alongside the patient and their primary care physician to make sure we're managing and helping to treat those symptoms. You can see this is a quick diagram about kind of the trajectory and the progression we see. Most of the country live in that wellness preventative care mode on the left side of the screen. And then if you have a diagnosis of a serious illness, you begin that middle phase. So as you can see, as the disease progresses, there's a greater and greater need for palliative care. And at some point when prognosis meets those criteria, hospice care becomes the treatment of choice. Now, there are a lot of folks that don't choose hospice care, and that is one of our struggles. Hospice is a very misunderstood benefit. When is it time to consider? That's what many families struggle with. And I can tell you that that decision is different for every individual based on their time of their diagnosis, the prognosis that's in front of them, and family considerations, cultural considerations. There's a lot of things that weigh in on that decision. So that time to consider is a very personal element But generally speaking, we want those individuals to maximize their time with us to make sure they get the full benefit of the service that we provide. But the question we often say, you know, I might be interested, but what do I need to do? Well, it's very simple for patients and families is you can talk to your physician or you can just reach out to us. We can talk to anyone at any time, but in order to start services, we need to collaborate with the physician. But we certainly spend a lot of time and energy out in the community educating folks on the benefit both of hospice care and palliative care, and when is the time to start asking those questions. The other struggle that we see is that a lot of individuals fail to prepare for end of life. So do you have advanced directives, a living will, a durable power of attorney? Have you talked to your family member about your wishes as you age? And the question is always, what do you want your care to look like? And one of the programs that we've been very, very fortunate to be a part of is Respecting Choices. It's a community-based effort with the Hospital Council of Northwest Ohio to have conversations about end-of-life care and to work with all the acute care facilities, and there's many other folks involved, to get those conversations out and get them out sooner, so that we can have an informed community that chooses care not based on fear, but based on knowledge. One of the other things we struggle with is length of stay, and the most common feedback we hear from patients and families is, I wish we would have known about hospice sooner. And I think that's a crime. And we've seen this for years. People that have experienced a hospice benefit overwhelmingly are positive about that. But I can tell you that the average length of stay for any hospice program nationwide is about 65 days. And when you're looking at a benefit that's designed for 180 days, that's a significant gap. And for those of us that provide end-of-life services, we really understand the benefit that you have for receiving all of those services for as long as possible. And from a financial standpoint, for all you finance folks in the crowd, there have been multiple studies that talk about end-of-life care and the fact that it is actually more reasonable than typical end-of-life care. And on average, saves Medicare about $28,000 in the final 3 months of care. So it's not just about quality of life, although that is our focus. There is a financial position to that as well. The other thing about length of stay that's kind of a crime in our perspective is that half of our patients pass away from our programs in less than 3 weeks. And nationwide, the median length of stay is 18 days. And actually, sadly, that trend is going down. In the last 2 years, it has decreased from 19 to 18 days. And generally speaking, over a quarter of our patients are with us less than 5 days. So there is significant need to get the message out about hospice. That's why we take every opportunity we can, like this one, to talk about hospice program and what is important to get that word out sooner and get those folks the benefit if it is the right time for them. And if you look at that average utilization, this is Medicare data, only half of those folks that qualify for hospice care receive it nationwide. That's the most recent data we have available to us, but that is something that we struggle with nationwide. Now, there are areas, and I will tell you that Northwest Ohio does a little better. They're closer to 60%, but there are also states that are in the 40s. So there's cultural impacts to that. There are a lot of things that we look at that impacts that number, but is certainly demonstrate that there's a gap in hospice care nationwide. So who qualifies for hospice is something that I can also talk about for over an hour, but there's really one question is, as you're dealing with a chronic illness, would you be surprised if your loved one or a family member is not with you 6 months from now? And if you would not be surprised, then maybe it's time to start asking questions about hospice. And if you're not ready to make that leap, the other benefit of our program is that palliative care services are there for you, regardless of that prognosis. So let's talk about everybody's favorite topic is the pandemic. One thing we've seen in the industry, and certainly have locally too, is COVID has had a significant impact For hospice programs, typically they'll help those that are the most vulnerable. And obviously COVID has targeted those folks. So what we've seen is a significant decline in hospice patients nationwide. A lot of that has to do with the fact that nursing homes were hit particularly hard and their census numbers declined significantly. And that is a significant referral source. If you think about the folks that live there, obviously a much higher percentage are eligible for hospice at any given time. So we're looking at a very struggling skilled nursing benefit that's out in the community, and along with staffing challenges, just like everybody else, they've got obviously patient flow problems because their census in a lot of ways has decreased by about 50%. We've seen a lot of regulatory changes with the public health emergency, and some of those have begun to relax. Some of those are a little bit controversial that they've begun to relax as far as who can provide care and when can they come back from the CDC based on CDC requirements. But infection control obviously was our major focus for the last almost 2 years now, I guess. And all of the impact it's had on staffing and our ability to care for patients. And most importantly for us, the ability for family members to be part of that care. If you think about hospice care in the industry, hospice wraps their arms around the patient and their family. So as we look to provide supportive services, how can we continue to wrap our arms around them when the family can't even go in the room? So you've seen the pictures on TV where family members are visiting through the windows, and we had the same phenomenon here. And we've been able to relax some of those requirements recently, but the most recent Omicron surge is putting that in jeopardy again. So we're having to adapt day by day based on regulatory changes and our ability to wrap our arms around those families. Obviously, PPE was a very significant challenge for us early on. There were supply chain issues. There was just really no stockpile that anyone can count on to receive these items that we need. Judy and the team were actually here sewing gowns, and they sewed hundreds of gowns. We still got probably 400 or 500 of them in our supply room that they were sewing in our large conference room to prepare for this because their supplies were just so low. And our ability to get masks were controlled by our vendors, and it was a struggle. And staffing also had a significant decline in 2021. The Great Resignation wasn't just other industries, it hit our industry very hard as well. So we're struggling with staffing issues just like the rest of healthcare. We're starting to see that rebound a little bit, and we're very thankful for that. But that has also impacted our ability to provide the care the way we like to. Again, the initial shutdown was significantly difficult for us because everybody was trying to react to how do we provide care, which employees can come in and provide care, what about access to patients and all the things I talked about earlier. And the hangover for those things are really what has had a significant impact on our staffing and patient perceptions about our care that we continue to struggle with. 2022, I talked about the Great Resignation. Those is still a challenge for us. We think it'll probably be 6 to 9 months before staffing fully recovers. Obviously, there are wage pressures just like everywhere else. If you have less people to hire, you have to drive wages up, and we're seeing that in the industry nationwide. Our reimbursement has decreased. They did a wage rebasing for 2022, and this region got a 2% decline. So we have to provide more care and pay the staff more with less resources. Along with that is increased regulatory scrutiny as we look at changes to our benefit, changes the way we provide services, a standardized assessment tool similar to what they've had in home care for years. Those are all things that require effort and administrative focus for us, and those changes are going to continue to ramp up. As we plan for the future, for us and what I've done with the team for the last year, since it's almost a year since I've been selected for this role, is understanding where we are today. So where does the organization stand on some key items? are we prepared and are we nimble enough to move forward and adjust as these regulatory changes come out? Some of the things we understand that are coming in that we're prepared for are a complete surprise. So we have to be nimble. We have to understand what are our flexibilities and how do we move forward. And the board has been very, very gracious and helpful as far as setting a direction for our future. And we're on the tail end of our strategic planning process, and we're very excited about that. Baby boomers I put out there. So even though our industry has taken a significant hit from COVID, one of the things that's looming out there, there are a ton of baby boomers retiring every single day. And that is going to have a significant impact and pressure on the industry and on healthcare as a whole as we move forward. So we have to be prepared for what will be probably in the next 5 to 10 years, a boom in end of life care as these baby boomers age. So, as we look at all the other pressures that are there from a wage, resources, this will ratchet that up significantly. Industry changes. So in healthcare, you're looking at, we have the need to expand access, and we have to expand access while working harder to stay compliant. Government regulations, as our biggest payer in healthcare, both Medicare and Medicaid, we have to comply with those. And the more and more regulatory requirements that come down, especially with the pandemic, the more pressure it puts on us to increase our administrative burden to make sure we're compliant. Information age is difficult. If you've had any health scares or started new to medication, what do most people do? They go out and research it, and they do the same thing for providers. So we're tasked with making sure that we're delivering high quality care, and the message that's out for the community is a positive one. And we want to be the best in the industry. But more importantly, the customers are looking at and understanding the benefits. So prior to the information age, we would spend a lot of time educating folks about what hospice is and trying to dispel some of the hospice myths. You know, a good portion of the time now, folks have a good understanding of what that is. That doesn't mean they don't have preconceived notions, because they do. And a lot of folks still think, even though they've researched it, that hospice is for the last week of life, and nothing could be farther from the truth. So there are increasingly knowledgeable customers, and they have higher expectations, and we have to meet that. But they are also researching our care, and Medicare Compare is a website that you can look and compare every hospice provider that's out there. You can compare our physicians. We need to make sure that we have that positive community image, and that we do compare favorably. You know, Dr. Google is there for everyone to research. So, you know, anytime something comes up in your life, and I do it myself, if I'm not sure what it is, I'm seeing what Dr. Google has to say about it. So that is a challenge, because, you know, one of the feedback, well, online it says, and there's a lot of challenging to our plans of care, which, you know, on one hand, you kind of understand. On the other hand, we have to make sure that we're building trust with the patient and family, so that when we put a plan of care in, and there's less opportunity to second guess. And we talked about reimbursement changes, but it's even going to get worse than decreasing reimbursement. There's more of a focus on outcomes. They're talking about value-based care, and that'll make significant changes to healthcare in our industry as well. We went through a rebasing of our reimbursement, and MedPAC has been pushing for years to get hospice reimbursement lower, and physician billing has been taking a beating for years. So we have to make sure that we're delivering the right care at the right time, focus on outcomes, and Medicare Compare is out there for everyone to see how we're doing. The other thing that's coming on the reimbursement side is what's called a Medicare carve-in, which, generally speaking, for the last 40 years, if someone required hospice care, they reverted back to the fee-for-service benefit. And that's been part of the hospice care carve-out for years. In the next 2 to 3 years, it's going to be carved in as part of the Medicare Advantage plan. So there's significant challenges for us as that reimbursement structure changes. So that is really part of the future for us. You know, historically, like I said, it was carved out. As it's carved in, we'll have to comply with commercial insurances and their need for authorization, their push to try and control the care we provide, change the way that care is provided. Our history says that our volunteers and the programs and our interdisciplinary team was able to really drive care based on our assessment and plan of care. Commercial insurances tend to want to get their nose in the middle of that and drive what they believe is higher quality of care. And that has the potential for a significant impact on the hospice benefit. And it's one that from a regulatory component, our National Hospice Palliative Care Organization continues to push back on. We're not going to stop Medicare carve-in, but we must protect the benefit. As I said earlier, there's a standardized assessment tool coming. What does that mean? That means that the federal government and CMS will tell us how to assess a patient, and they will make sure that we report to them certain information. And what that means is a very large administrative burden that'll be pushed onto the hospice provider as a result. And always we look at access to end-of-life care. There are underserved populations throughout the country. Culturally, there are much lower rates for the African American community and the Hispanic community. Those gaps are closing, but it has taken a considerable amount of effort, and is one of the things that we continue to focus on as we're reaching out in the community is how do we get more care to those underserved populations. So as we look to recover from the pandemic and prepare for the boom that we think is coming as a result of all our baby boomers retiring and aging, we make sure that we're still providing the highest quality care as we're continuing to ramp up our services, and most importantly, find the right individuals to care for those folks as we grow. And I talked really fast, and I apologize for that, but I would love to take any questions that you have right now.
Matt's going to direct the questions to you, Rick, and then we'll kind of wait on him to see if we can get some from outside, and then I may have a few too.
Great.
All righty. The easiest thing here would be for everybody just to raise their hand in the Zoom window if you have a question, and I will call on you. It's a fantastic presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
Hello?
Oops. I do see one hand. Go ahead and M. Davies, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Hi, thank you for such a great and timely presentation, Rick. As I said in the comments, my husband, who's a former Rotarian, has just availed himself and ourselves of Hospice of Services this weekend. But prior to that, Judy Lang, who is a dear family friend of ours, and of course, who was with Hospice for years, had highly recommended to me a book called Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, a physician from Athens, Ohio. Could you, I know one of your slides spoke to preparing yourself for your own plan for how you envision your end of life, as well as your loved ones. Are there, can you speak to that particular book, Being Mortal, or other resources of which people could avail themselves to make those decisions going forward? Thank you.
Certainly, there are a large number of resources that are available out there. And what we're really referring to mostly is having conversations with your family about what you want care to look like. That conversation is critical. A lot of times family members are making default decisions because they don't really understand the needs. And that conversation is really where we start when we interact with patients and families, because we want to understand, A, do you understand where you are in your journey? And B, does your family also have that same understanding? That meeting of the minds, as it were, is critical to help developing a plan forward. And the best time to have those conversations is not when there's a crisis, but it's when family is together and while everything is normal. The worst time to make a decision is a crisis, although we see those conversations and during crisis over and over again. And it is one of the reasons that the length of stay is so short. The book you've mentioned, Being Mortal, is a phenomenal read, and it really talks about the heart of hospice care and what that is all about from his perspective. And we've actually embarked on a program called Vital Talk, where we're educating physicians on how to have those end-of-life conversations, because family members and patients that have never understood really what the trajectory is a significant hurdle for us to overcome. And the reluctance is because the physicians aren't comfortable having those conversations. Right. So we're embarking on a huge community effort this year, start with the University of Toledo College of Medicine and Life Science to push those programs out. We'll extend it to other partners in the community as they become aware of it, to provide those services, that education. It really uses scenarios. We actually bring actors in that will demonstrate and set up difficult conversations for them, give them the ability to practice, and it's been a phenomenal effort for us.
Thank you.
And one of the best tools, if you're talking about discussing with your family and developing kind of an understanding of what your wishes are, there's a booklet called 5 Wishes, and it really helps you walk through in very simple language about what expectations you have as your health declines, what care would you like to have, and it helps build what would become a living will. In some states, it actually serves as a living will. Ohio, unfortunately, doesn't recognize it, but it still is a great tool to help build a foundation for that.
Alrighty, thank you. Next question I have is from Mary Mancini. Mary, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
You're still muted, Mary.
Yes. Should see a prompt on your screen that says, have you been asked to unmute? You should just be able to click that. There you go.
There you are.
Thank you. I served on the hospice board many years ago when it was the only hospice in Northwest Ohio. And what I'm wondering now is how many hospice programs do we have in Northwest Ohio? And are they all nonprofit or are some for-profit?
So I can tell you there are, I believe, 4 nonprofit programs in the area. A couple of them are very small. One of them is the program associated with ProMedica. And then there are, I believe the number is now 9 for-profit programs in the area. 2 of those are brand new and actually have not received Medicare certification as of yet. But we're seeing more and more pressure from the on the for-profit side to get these programs up and running, because part of it is because there is a great need. Another part of it is that there's a lot of private equity money out there that are driving a lot of these programs to open up, because they're trying to get ahead of the curve for what we think is a boom coming for both home care and hospice.
So are they more national firms or?
Yeah, there are many more national firms, and a lot of what you see of these small startup programs, their intent is just to get the program up and running and then sell it to one of the national players. So it is kind of a profit play. And, you know, in my humble opinion, being part of the largest nonprofit in the area for hospice care, you don't get the same mission, you don't get the same care, you don't get the same dedication to the community that you get with Hospice of Northwest Ohio.
I agree totally. Thank you.
And thank you for serving on our board.
Ironically, Matt, you are muted.
Yep.
I went ahead and unmuted. Matt, was I next? If not, I'll remute
Nope.
myself.
Next up is Gary Johnson.
I was listening to the program and I'm not sure that I heard you talk about the service that hospice offers for people that want to stay home and not necessarily come to the facility. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that if you hadn't talked about it earlier.
The care we provide is the same no matter where you're located. So in the home, we provide nursing services and available to nursing care at any time of day. We provide aid services to help in personal care and anything that needs to be done around the home to support that care. We have social workers to help with a lot of different things. They can help with advanced directives. They can help with needs in the home or support from the community. We have spiritual caregivers that can come out and provide spiritual support. That's not religious support. There's a lot of folks that aren't religious but are spiritual. They can help in any of those regards. And then our physicians and nurse practitioners available to do visits in the home or see the patients in any of the facilities as needed to help support that care. And then one of the things that's been the foundation of hospice from the beginning is support from volunteers. Since the hospice benefit was driven by volunteers in its founding, that volunteer requirement continues. And we do provide volunteers. Right now, it's a little dicey with the pandemic, but we provide volunteers to go to the home to help sit. Friendly visitor, and if they have specific training, they can do other things. But volunteer services are another big part of what we do. And then the bereavement services, a lot of times we have families dealing with anticipatory grief. So they're starting to grieve even prior to the loss of their loved one, and bereavement services are available to them at that point, and those continue to be available for 13 months, minimally after, but as long as they need.
Thank you. I just assumed those services were a lot more difficult with the pandemic, but I was just wondering if they were still something that hospice was able to offer when it's appropriate.
Yeah, volunteer services would have been the limiting factor for us because we didn't want to put volunteers out in the community where there was potential for harm for them. So that was something that was scaled back pretty significantly, but we're starting to see those creep back up. We're not yet going out to skilled nursing facilities because our positivity rate is still pretty high. So those are the services we provide. What people a lot of times don't understand is the other things that are provided. So we provide all the drugs that are needed to care for that patient, and that is paid for by us. Any equipment that's necessary in order to keep that patient comfortable and as high functioning as possible and improve quality of life, that equipment is also paid for us by us. And then any supplies that are necessary, medical supplies, incontinence products, all of those things are covered by the hospice program.
Thank you. Next up is the gentleman from Republic Development.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for that talk, Rick. I had two parents that went through hospice through Hospice of Northwest Ohio, and it was a good experience. But I was, maybe it's a misconception, but you just mentioned that medications and other things were provided to patients. I was under the understanding that when a patient came into hospice, that really all sort of treatment to prolong life ended, and that in fact, that the stated objective was to make the patient be as comfortable as possible, but that efforts to prolong life would not be undertaken by hospice. And that relates to the question that you posed about you wish that patients were coming into hospice sooner. And I know in our experience, when you're working with doctors, they think that they have, and they do have, really good capabilities to extend life. And that decision point about, you know, when is it not fruitful to try to extend life versus you know, or keep at it. That's a really obviously a really difficult question. But I you know, the sense is that when we're working with doctors, when you decide to go into hospice, you kind of unplug, you remove all the tubes. There's a liberation of moment, but they're going into care where it's not going to be trying to extend life at all. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, well, so I can tell you that hospice care has kind of evolved over the last 15 to 20 years. And, you know, our goal is always for quality of life. So the goal is never to extend a prognosis. So if there's treatment involved, which goal is to prolong life beyond what hospice would typically cover, then that would not be covered under the benefit, and that individual would not be eligible for hospice. But let me use heart disease as an example. You know, there's a lot of time where folks with heart disease end up on multiple medications. And, you know, there is a misconception that once you come on a hospice program, all those medications will stop. And we will stop all those medications and just keep you comfortable. Well, by stopping those medications, you're actually going to increase the discomfort, because a lot of times those medications are controlling symptoms. So someone with heart disease may be on a medication that would help with angina. Another medication could help with shortness of breath. So the last thing we would do is discontinue medications that would help support any quality of life. In some cases, it also may be determined to prolong life. So always the question for us is it the right thing to do for the patient and family? And does that medication or even that treatment, is the goal to help improve comfort? And if the goal is to help improve comfort and to improve quality of life, we're going to provide that care and service, as long as it does not change the prognosis. So the typical example that people use is someone dealing with a cancer diagnosis. In one case, you might be receiving chemotherapy and radiation to help try and achieve cure. In another case, you might be receiving chemo and radiation in order to maintain comfort and to control symptoms. The first one, where you're trying to achieve cure, would not be one that was covered under hospice. But if your goal is to try and control symptoms, that would be covered under hospice. And we do pay for radiation therapy all the time, and some chemotherapies if the goal is comfort. So that's the distinction that we have. And that's a fine line that we walk a lot of times. A lot has to do with the patient and their families, their goals of care. So when we talk about goals of care, that's the path we go down. And then we ask the patient and family, what do you want your care to look like? And if that treatment is going to help drive that higher quality of care, we are going to provide it.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
All righty. At this time, I do not see any additional questions. If anyone has a last question, raise your hand. Otherwise, thank you very much, sir. I will turn the meeting back over to President Bob.
Thanks, Matt. And Rick, thanks so much. That was a great presentation. A lot of information. And since you're, again, welcome as a new member, so we'll have access to you with all of our little questions every now and then. So I appreciate that. In appreciation, we will also be presenting you with a book called Historical Tales of Toledo by our past president, Clint Mock. And we'll also be making a donation to Polio Plus. And well, hopefully you can get that book in person. We shouldn't have to mail it. I'm hoping to be back with in-person meetings. And Jackie should also give you a Rotary pin. And maybe she'll even come up with a Reese's peanut butter egg for you. I'm not sure.
I'll take it.
With that, I'm going to move on to Chuck Mann, and I promised I would introduce him today for whatever it's worth and whatever chuckle we have. So Chuck, it's all yours.
What a glowing tribute. Winston Churchill passed into history in London on this day in 1965. He was 90 years old. Here are 7 quick quotes by Winston Churchill. The best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. Mr. Attlee is a very modest man. Indeed, he has a lot to be modest about. Oh boy, my most brilliant achievement was my ability to be able to persuade my wife to marry me. Whew, that's very true there. Ending a sentence with a proposition is something up with which I will not put. Tact is the ability to tell someone to go to hell in such a way that they look forward to the trip. Here's one for today. I'm ready to meet my maker. Whether my maker is prepared for the great ordeal of meeting me is another matter. And finally, Lady Astor said to him, Winston, if I was your wife, I'd put poison in your coffee. Churchill replied, Nancy, if I was your husband, I'd drink it. President Bob.
Thank you. And as usual, we got a good chuckle out of Chuck's Chuckles. Our next meeting is January 31st, and COVID willing, it will be our last one that is on Zoom for the near future. We will be having Mark Folk, President and CEO of the Arts Commission, as our speaker. And so hopefully we'll see what happens with staffing at Toledo Club and with the COVID rates in the area. And we're hoping very much to get back in person rather than on Zoom again. So next week, I'm sure we'll be on Zoom after that. Let's keep our fingers crossed. And again, Rick, thanks for a great presentation. And with that, since I have no bell, we are adjourned.